He sent her back, called her too big to be a bride. That night the snow took his son, and only she dared to follow. The wind howled like a woman grieving, screaming through the naked trees of Wyoming's Bitter Hollow Valley. Snow blew sideways, slicing across the land like tiny knives. And yet, despite the storm, Stagecoach stopped. She stepped out. Matilda didn't flinch as the wind hit her full in the face. She stood tall, taller than most women, wrapped in a faded navy cloak, too thin for the weather. Her boots sank into the snow, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, and in her arms she clutched a small wooden box tied in ribbon. All she had left in the world. From the porch of the ranch house, up the hill, a man stood watching, Colt Renshaw. He leaned against the door frame, a rifle resting at his side. His eyes were cold and calculating, taking her in like a horse he hadn't ordered. She climbed toward the house, her breath puffing in clouds, her steps slow but steady. The driver glanced at Colt. "You Renshaw?" Colt nodded once. "She's yours, mail-order bride? Paperwork's in the box." Matilda smiled, a hopeful, soft smile. "Mr. Renshaw?" She called, wind nearly stealing her voice. "It's me, Matilda." Colt's jaw tensed. His eyes flicked from her face to her figure, lingering. There was no hiding it. She was a full woman, not the delicate frame he expected, not what he'd paid for. He stepped forward slowly, boots crunching on the frost-hardened wood. I know I may be larger than you imagined, but I can work. I cook well so fast, and I didn't order a cook," he cut in. "I ordered a wife." The wind stilled for a second, like even the blizzard was stunned, behind Colt. A child peeked through the window, a little boy with wide blue eyes and golden hair. His breath fogged the glass as he stared at Matilda with innocent curiosity. Colt followed Matilda's gaze to the boy and scowled. "It's my son. He don't need confusing." Matilda swallowed. "Never meant to confuse anyone. I just want a place, to belong." Without another word, Colt turned. Then slammed shut in her face. The sound echoed across the valley like a gunshot. The stagecoach it's already gone. Matilda stood frozen, heart pounding beneath her heavy layers. The snow swirled cruelly around her, biting through fabric and skin. But she didn't cry. She didn't knock again. She simply turned and walked away from the house that was supposed to be her salvation that night. The storm deepened. Wolves howled in the distance. The wind screamed louder, and just before midnight, Colt's son was no longer in his bed. His footprints were the only thing left, fading fast beneath the falling snow. Matilda had walked for what felt like hours. But she hadn't gone far, not really. Her feet, soaked through and raw from the cold, had carried her only to the edge of the pine woods. There, she found the hollow trunk of a fallen birch and crawled inside like a wounded animal. Pages worn soft from years of clinging, she held, both close, and whispered, "Lord, I thought maybe this time I'd get to stay." But inside that hollow tree, she waited. Not for rescue, she didn't believe in that anymore, but for daylight. Back at the Renshaw house, Colt stormed through the cabin, lantern in hand. "Caleb," he shouted. "Boy, this ain't funny." The child's bed was empty. Gone. Window cracked open, snow blowing in like the breath of death. Colt's jaw clenched. His hands shook as he grabbed his coat and hat. Why would he leave? He muttered, trying to reason with something that couldn't be reasoned with. He knows better. But Caleb was only 7, and snow didn't care how much you knew. Colt burst out into the white dark, lantern light barely pushing back the swirling flurries. "Caleb," he roared into the storm. His voice bounced off trees and vanished into silence. Panic clawed at him. The storm was bad enough, but wolves had come down from the ridge lately. He'd heard them yelping at night. Hungrier now that winter had dried up the valley's veins, Matilda heard the shouting. She stirred inside the tree, heart thudding. For a moment, she thought maybe it was in her head, but then she heard it again. Clearer, louder, Caleb. The name struck her chest like lightning. That little boy, the one in the window. She sat up, breath catching in her throat. Her fingers dug into the scarf in her lap. Crimson red, soft and frayed. It wasn't hers. It was the same one the boy had been holding when he peeked through the window. She had picked it up from the snow without thinking, just before the tree swallowed her, and now it was gone. Matilda didn't hesitate. She pulled the scarf tight around her neck, stood up, stumbled back into the snow. Colt stumbled through the trees, the lantern flickering. "Caleb, come on, boy!" His voice cracked now, edged with fear he didn't dare name. But the wind was erasing them faster than he could follow. Then crunch. He turned, and from the trees came her Matilda. She looked like a ghost in the snow, pale-faced, snowflakes clinging to her lashes, scarf around her neck glowing red in the lantern light. Colt's eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing out here?" She didn't answer. She just lifted the scarf. His breath caught. "That's Caleb's." "I found it near the old creek bend," she said, voice soft but steady. "He may have gone that way. The snow's filling the tracks fast." Colt stepped forward. "That's 2 miles off." She held his gaze. "Then we'd best start walking." For a long second, he just stared at her. This woman he'd shut out, called too big, too much. And now, she was the only one who knew which way to go, as they turned into the trees, side by side, in the swirling storm. Colt felt the sharpest stab of guilt he'd ever known, because tonight, the woman he'd thrown away might be the only person who could save his boy. The forest was a graveyard of frozen silence. Each step Colt and Matilda took vanished under the falling snow. The lantern in Colt's hand swayed like a dying star, its golden light swallowed by the darkness between the trees. Wind hissed through the pines, bending their spines like they were whispering secrets. Matilda kept her eyes ahead. She didn't speak unless necessary, and Colt didn't know what to say. He'd never walked beside a woman like her before, not just in size, but in purpose. She wasn't frail. She moved like someone who'd been through enough storms to know how to stand in one. He glanced sideways. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold, hair soaked under her bonnet, lips blue. But she didn't slow. "You'll freeze," he muttered finally. She looked at him without stopping. "And I'll freeze while searching. That boy's out. Here, somewhere." Colt looked down, ashamed. "You don't owe me this." "No," she said. "But Caleb doesn't owe me your mistake." He'd been raised to think women were meant to be delicate, obedient. But here she was. He already knew. Because she knew what it was to be cast aside. Half a mile later, they reached the old creek bend. Snow had buried it, but Matilda saw what Colt missed. The barely there prints where a child might have stumbled. The red scarf had been found nearby, after all. "There," she said. Matilda turned slowly, scanning the trees. Children don't walk straight. They follow light or sound. Almost swallowed by the wind, she didn't wait. She ran. Branches clawed at her cloak as she barreled through the trees, her legs aching, lungs burning. Colt followed, crashing after her, heart hammering in his chest, and there tucked beneath a fallen log, curled up like a kitten, was Caleb. He was shivering violently, eyes glassy, lips pale. His tiny hands clutched a frozen twig like it could protect him. Matilda dropped to her knees. "Sweetheart, it's all right," she whispered, wrapping him in her arms. "Duh, you're safe now, I've got you." He blinked slowly. You came." "Yes, baby, I came." Colt caught up, falling to his knees beside them. He looked at his boy, at the frost on his lashes, the tremble in his body, and felt tears prick his eyes. "Caleb," he choked. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, son." But Caleb didn't look at him, kept his gaze on Matilda. "She smells like pie," he mumbled sleepily, before his eyes fluttered shut. Matilda smiled gently, rocking him. "We'll get him warm." Colt stared at her, heart pounding. She hadn't just found his son. She'd wrapped his shame in mercy, his failure in grace. As they walked back through the snow, Caleb cradled in Matilda's arms. Colt couldn't help but whisper, "Ink." "You," she didn't reply, but in the dark, she smiled. Sometimes, kindness is the loudest answer. Stories like this remind us that heroes don't always wear badges sometimes. They wear broken hearts stitched back together. If this moment touched you even a little. Drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe for more true Western heart tales, because the next chapter might just change you. The cabin's door flew open with a thud, snow whipping in behind them like the storm was trying to follow. Matilda didn't wait for permission. She strode straight in, cradling Caleb tight, and headed for the hearth. Colt stumbled in after her. Arms full of firewood, boots shaking snow onto the wooden floor, Matilda knelt, gently laying Caleb on the bearskin rug near the fireplace. The boy barely stirred, his breath shallow, skin pale. "Get that fire going," she said without looking at Colt. Her voice wasn't sharp, it was steel. Cold but strong. Colt obeyed like a soldier. The kindling caught quickly. Soon, flames licked the chimney and cast a golden glow across the room. Shadows danced along the log walls, chasing away the cold that had crept in through every crack. Matilda peeled off her soaked gloves and pulled Caleb closer. She didn't shiver, though her clothes were damp and her fingers near frozen. Her entire body was focused on one thing, warming the child. She began rubbing his hands gently, blowing warm air between them. "You're okay, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're home." Colt stood uselessly behind her, guilt thick in his chest like tar. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. What could he say? That he'd turned her away because she wasn't the size he imagined? That he'd rather freeze in pride than thaw in humility? He reached for a quilt from the chair and handed it to her. She wrapped it around Caleb and herself, still not looking at Colt. "I'll make tea," I mumbled. She gave a small nod. Minutes passed. The wind howled outside, but the fire crackled loud enough to drown it. Colt watched from the corner of the room, arms crossed. He wasn't used to feeling helpless. He'd faced wild horses, blizzards, and debt collectors, but nothing had ever humbled him like this woman holding his son like he was her own. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't have to come back," he said softly. Matilda looked up. Her face was soft with exhaustion, but her eyes still burned. "I didn't," she agreed. "So why did you?" Matilda adjusted the quilt around Caleb. "Because you were wrong," she said simply. Colt blinked. "About what?" "About me," she replied. "About what a woman is worth." The silence that followed was heavy, not angry, just truthful. Later that night, Caleb stirred. His small voice rasped, "Ma'am, you're warm." Matilda smiled. Down at him. "That's the fire, darling." "No," he murmured. "It's you." Her heart cracked open like spring ice. She pressed her lips to his forehead. "Sleep, little one." Colt watched the moment like a man watching something sacred. He felt like an outsider in his own home. He cleared his throat. "Matilda, ... I'm sorry. For earlier, for everything." She didn't answer immediately. Then, "Sorry. Don't patch up a broken roof. Takes nails and time." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll get to hammering." For the first time since she arrived, she smiled. Just a flicker. But it was enough to set something warm loose in Colt's chest. The wind howled, less by dawn. But inside, a fire burned, one that neither of them expected. The storm had eased by morning, leaving behind a hush that wrapped around the cabin like a quilt. Colt stood by the window, watching snow drip from the eaves, listening to the soft rhythm of Caleb's breathing. Matilda sat near the hearth, gentle hush in her posture, rocking slowly with Caleb asleep against her chest. Her face was tired, but peaceful, the kind of peace that came only after surviving something fierce. Colt cleared his throat. "I was going to head to town today," he said quietly, almost testing the words. "Fetch the dock. Maybe some flour." Matilda didn't move, didn't look up. "Odell be buried for a day or two. You'll get stuck halfway and freeze." Colt nodded. Of course she'd thought ahead. A pause, then she spoke. "You want to help? Boil water? There's a kettle behind." The stove? It was simple, direct. But to Colt, it felt like a second chance. While the kettle heated, Matilda finally laid Caleb gently down on the couch and stretched her sore arms. Her fingers rubbed at her wrists, red from the cold, but she didn't. Complained. Colt noticed something else now, near her bag. A small, ribbon-wrapped box. Not the one she carried into town with her name written on the tag. No, this one was older, worn, tied in blue velvet string, frayed at the edges. It sat on the side table, untouched. "What's in that?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Matilda's eyes flicked to the box. Her face changed, softened, stiffened, like a memory had punched her gut. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood, walked over to the box, and slowly untied the ribbon. The lid creaked open. Inside, a pair of baby shoes, worn brown leather, tiny as a songbird's skull. Colt felt his throat tighten. He didn't speak. Didn't dare. Matilda picked up one shoe, ran her thumb along its side like she was touching. A ghost. "He'd have been 7 this spring," she whispered. Colt's breath caught. "You had a son?" he asked. Gently she nodded once. "Born on the train ride out west. Never made it past the first frost." Her voice didn't break. It was already broken, smoothed down with time like river stones. "I came west, thinking I'd get a new start. Maybe a husband who'd overlooked the weight, the age, the past. Maybe even children again." Colt felt something shift in him, something heavy, honest. "And then you saw me," she continued, "and all you saw was a body that didn't fit your porch, a cut deep." Colt didn't flinch. "I was wrong," he said. She set the shoe down, carefully placing the lid back on the box. "I didn't come here to fix you, Mr. Renshaw. I came because I was tired of being nobody. But I won't beg to be seen. Not again." Colt swallowed hard. "I don't want you to beg," he said, voice low. "I just want you to stay." Behind them, Caleb stirred and sat up, eyes half-lidded. "Miss Matilda, can I keep the quilt?" he mumbled. She smiled gently, brushing hair from his brow. "Of course you can, sugar." Colt watched them, the woman who'd been frozen out, and the boy who saw her for her warmth. Suddenly the cabin didn't feel so cold anymore. That evening the storm outside returned, gentler now, more whisper than roar. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. The silence between Matilda and Colt wasn't heavy anymore, just waiting. Matilda had gone quiet after dinner. She sat by the fire again, her hands wrapped around a tin mug of weak tea. Caleb had fallen asleep on the bearskin rug, thumb tucked into his palm, chest rising and falling, slow as snowfall. Colt watched from across the room, unsure whether to speak or simply be there. That's when he saw it, a folded envelope half tucked under. Her sacked. It looked old, yellowed around the edges, but it wasn't sealed. Her name was written on the front in faded pencil, to the man who never wrote back. Matilda noticed him looking. She sighed, reached over and picked it up. For a long time she just held it. Her thumb rested on the corner like she was weighing its weight against her soul. "I never meant to keep it," she said softly, "but it's followed me across 7 states and 5 winters." Colt leaned forward. "What's it say?" Matilda didn't answer. Instead, she unfolded it carefully like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her voice was low, but steady. "Dear sir, I reckon you never saw my photograph. If you had, maybe you'd have written back. Maybe not. That's your right. Either way. But just so you know, I ain't looking to be anyone's burden. I cook good, can patch a roof, birth a foal, and boil willow bark for fever. I ain't afraid of snow or silence, but I am tired of being invisible. I've known loss. I buried a son no bigger than a sack of sugar. I held my sister's hand as she bled out after a cattle raid. And yet here I am, still hoping some man out there might want more than a painted face and a paper waist. If you're not that man, that's all right. But if you are, maybe send a letter back. Matilda May Burnham." The room held its breath. Colt sat back, jaw tight, heart cracking open in ways he didn't expect. "I never got that letter," he said, voice hoarse. "If I had..." Matilda folded the paper again and slipped it back under the bag. "Doesn't matter now." "Yes, it does." Hey. She looked up. In her eyes was the last flicker of a woman trying not to hope. Colt didn't break that silence with more words. He stood, crossed the space between them, and sat beside her by the fire. His hand hovered a moment, then gently settled on hers. Not forceful, not claiming, just there. A warmth Matilda hadn't let herself feel in years crept through her chest. No promises, no pretty lies. Just a man finally seeing her and not looking away. Snow had stopped some time before dawn. The cabin was wrapped in a heavy white silence. At a pan like it might bite him. His hair was still messy from sleep, and his shirt hung loose at the collar. The fire had gone low, so he quietly added more wood. Careful not to wake Caleb or Matilda. She was still asleep on the armchair, her head tilted back slightly, lips parted. For the first time since arriving, her face looked truly at rest. He turned. Back to the pan. Flour, eggs, lard. He muttered under his breath. How hard can it be? It turns out pretty damn hard. He cracked an egg straight onto the counter. Dropped half the flour on the floor. The skillet popped hot grease onto his wrist, and he swore under his breath. But he didn't stop, because it wasn't about the biscuits. It was about giving something back. Even if it was clumsy, even if it was late, the smell of food finally roused. Matilda. She stirred slowly, her body stiff from the wooden chair. She blinked against the light creeping in through the frost-lined window and inhaled sharply bacon. Not. That looked remarkably like real food. Biscuits, eggs, a few slices of bacon. The plate was chipped, but clean, the fork polished. And beside the plate, a sprig of pine. She sat up fully. He turned and noticed her. Morning, he said, clearing his throat. Didn't know if you liked coffee, but I made it anyway. Blinked. You. Cooked? I tried, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Might be dangerous, but it smells edible. Matilda stood, walked over slowly. Picked up the plate. It was warm, and so was something else in her chest, a kind of stunned. Quiet gratitude she didn't have words for. Caleb, still wrapped in quilts by the fire, opened one eye. Ma cooked. Nope, Colt said. Did Caleb sat up straight like someone had shouted fire? Matilda chuckled, the sound soft and surprised even to her own ears. She sat down, took a bite. The biscuit was dry. The eggs were overdone. Somehow, it was one of the best meals she'd ever had. She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. He just sat across from her. Since she arrived, the silence between them felt safe. Outside, the world was still frozen, but inside the cabin, something had begun to thaw. By late afternoon, the wind returned louder this time. A deep, howling moan curled through the pines like a wolf's sorrow. Snow battered the cabin walls, and the windows trembled in their wooden frames. It wasn't just a snowfall, it was a blizzard. Colt secured the shutters, watching the world disappear into white. I've never seen snow fall sideways before, she murmured. It does that out here, Colt said. Like it's got something to prove. Caleb was on the floor with a deck of bent playing cards, trying to teach himself a game. That made no sense. The cabin was warm. The storm made it feel smaller, like the outside world had sealed them in. For the first time, Colt didn't mind. As night settled in, the fire became their sun. Orange glow flickered across Colt's face as he sat in the rocking chair, eyes half closed. Matilda was opposite him, mending the seam of her glove, but her gaze strayed off into him, to the fire. To Caleb snoring softly on a pile of quilts, the storm beat louder. And then silence. The kind of silence that made you forget everything before it. And in that quiet, Colt spoke. I used to live here with my brother, he said suddenly. His name was Luke. Matilda looked up, her fingers stilling. He was older than me, smarter, kinder. He built this place before I came west. I showed up half-starved and bitter after a bad war, and he took me in like I hadn't left him behind. Colt's voice cracked slightly. He died in that chair. Matilda's eyes flicked to the one Colt was sitting in. Flu took him, middle of winter. Doc couldn't make it through the pass in time. The fire popped. Matilda set her sewing aside. Buried him myself, Colt said. Quieter now. Out back. Under the big pine. A long pause. Then Matilda stood, crossed the room, and sat beside him. Not across. Not near. Beside her, fingers gently brushed his. "I lost someone in winter too," she whispered. "My son." They didn't cry. They didn't need to. They just sat, two wounded souls pressed together by the cold, stitched together by memory. Colt turned slightly, and Matilda rested her head on his shoulder. "I thought this cabin would always feel empty," he said. "Now it doesn't." Outside, the storm kept screaming, but inside, nothing needed fixing. Nothing needed saying. They had found in each other something even warmer than fire, understanding. The fire had dimmed to a low. Pulsing ember, Colt was dozing in the rocking chair, his arms still draped loosely. Around Matilda's shoulders, her breathing had evened out, her head resting softly against his chest, exhausted itself. But then knock, knock. The sound sliced through the quiet like a blade through linen. Colt's eyes snapped open. Matilda jerked upright, blinking hard, as if unsure whether she'd heard it or dreamt it. Then dash knock. Knock this time, louder, heavier, urgent. Colt stood immediately, reaching behind the woodpile to where his old Winchester leaned. The storm shouldn't have let anyone through. The trail was buried, the winds fierce enough to snap trees. No one should have been out there. He moved to the door slowly. Matilda rose too, wrapping Caleb in a quilt and drawing him closer to the fireplace. Her heart thundered against her ribs. Something about the knock wasn't right. It wasn't neighborly. It wasn't desperate. It was measured. It's like whoever was knocking wasn't afraid. Colt placed his hand on the beam holding the door shut. "Who's out there?" called silence. Just the moaning wind and the soft creak of snow shifting off the roof. Then a voice, raspy. "Her? I came for her." Matilda froze. Her fingers curled into the quilt. Colt turned his head slowly toward her. "You know that voice?" She didn't answer. Her skin had gone pale as frosted Matilda. He asked again, stepping toward her. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then the voice called again, this time louder and unmistakable. "Matilda May Burnham. Open the door." Colt swung back toward the entrance, chest tight. He hadn't told anyone she was here. Hell, no one in 50 miles even knew her name, except him and Caleb. So how did a stranger in the dead of night, in the middle of a blizzard, know exactly who she was? Colt looked back. Matilda's face had changed. Not just fear now, recognition, but not the kind that brings comfort, the kind that digs up something buried. Deep something she'd crossed 7 states to outrun. Outside, the knocking stopped, replaced by silence. A silence heavier than snow. A silence that knew too. Much Colt didn't move. He stood inches from the door, hand on the rifle, eyes flicking to Matilda, who looked like she'd seen a ghost. Because maybe, who is it? Colt asked again, voice low but firm. Matilda didn't answer. She was shaking, not from cold, but something else, something deeper. Colt took one step back from the door, rifle raised slightly. "Matilda, tell me now, who was out there?" "He died. Over a year ago. In Kansas." Colt's brow furrowed. "You?" "Sure." She nodded slowly. "I buried him." Stood over his grave. A chill swept through the room, colder than any winter. Colt didn't lower the rifle. Then someone's lying. He inched the door open just enough to peek through the gap. The snow blinded his view, but a figure stood still at the edge of the front steps. Cloaked in dark oilskin, a hat pulled low, no movement. Just standing, like he was waiting for her. To come to him, Colt shut the door. He ain't armed. But he's not freezing either, which means he ain't out there by accident. Matilda stepped forward slowly, lips trembling. If it's him, his name's Royce. He wasn't just a man I knew. Colt's jaw clenched. "Was he your husband?" "No," she said. Then quieter, worse. Flashback Kansas, 1869. The saloon was loud, but the corner booth was always quiet. Royce had a way of making noise without raising his voice. Was handsome, charming, and dangerous. He sold dreams. People believed him. Matilda was one of them, until the lies unraveled debts he never mentioned. Fire. Everyone thought he died in it. Matilda moved on, changed her name, started over, and now was standing outside her cabin. Colt turned toward her again. You don't owe me your past, but you owe that boy by the fire the truth. And if he gets close, he won't stop at just knocking. Colt's expression changed. Outside, the man was still standing. No words, no threat. Just that same unbearable stillness. Waiting inside, Colt handed Matilda his old revolver. Her hands trembled as she took it. She looked at him, eyes filled with a fear she hadn't shown before. But Colt, he just nodded once. Whatever he was to you, ain't walking through that door unless we say so. The night stretched endlessly. The fire cracked low, reduced to glowing coals. Colt barely blinked, sitting guard at the door, his rifle balanced across his lap. Matilda dozed fitfully in the corner chair, clutching the revolver like it was the only thing tethering her to the present. And outside, Royce never left. He didn't yell, didn't demand, just stood, as if he knew time would do his bidding, as if waiting was his power. By midnight, Colt had boarded the back windows too. Can't risk him circling, he murmured. Men like that don't play by rules. He glanced. At Matilda? You sure he's not armed? She hesitated. He doesn't need to be. Colt's jaw tensed. Morning crept in. Barely a pale blue light through the frost-caked panes. The blizzard had calmed, but the cold was deeper now. Like it had sunk into the bones of the land, Colt finally stood, stretched his legs, and cracked the door just an inch. The steps were empty. Snow smooth as untouched flour. Royce was gone. Colt stepped outside slowly, scanning the tree line. No footprints. Leading away. No sign of movement. Just one set of boot prints leading in, none leaving. He followed them off the porch. Rifle ready. 10 steps in, he saw it. Something small. Nestled in the snow, a black coin, shiny. Familiar. Colt picked it up and froze. It was his brother's army medallion. It's the one buried with Luke under the pine tree out back. His blood ran cold. Matilda, he shouted, turning, but his voice died because the front door was wide open and Caleb was gone. Matilda screamed. The sound tore through the trees like a hawk's cry. She was already out in the snow barefoot, frantic eyes wide with terror. Caleb, she screamed again, her voice cracking. Colt caught her before she collapsed. There were no footsteps leaving, muttered, trying to process. No signs. Of struggle? How? Matilda shook her head, sobbing. He wouldn't go with a stranger. Not willingly. Colt's heart hammered.
Oh.
Then maybe Royce wasn't here for you. He looked at the coin again. Maybe he came for me. It searched the woods for hours. No trail. No tracks. No hint. Just endless white. Like the boy had been erased by the storm, Colt stared into the horizon, fists clenched. He'd fought in war, buried a brother, seen good men lose their souls, but this was personal. Back in the cabin, Matilda sat on the floor, cradling Caleb's coat. Her eyes were distant. Hollow. Colt stood in the doorway, rifle in hand. Silent. He didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in fate, but the medallion in his palm told him. Something bigger was at play. The fire had gone out. Colt sat in the corner. Eyes sunken, jaw clenched like stone. Coin still rested in his palm, a ghost from a grave that was supposed to stay shut. Matilda hadn't spoken in hours, just sat on the floor. Caleb's coat folded in her lap like a sacred relic. Her lips moved in silent prayer or apology. Even she didn't know which. Then Colt stepped out into the dawn light again. Frost bit his cheeks. Wind howled between the trees, but it carried something new this time. A paper, pinned to the fence post. By a black iron nail, he pulled it off slowly, careful not to tear it. The paper was crisp, unmarked, except for the single line in elegant, old-fashioned script. The boy walks with the blood of the dead, and they never forget a debt. No signature, no name. But Colt's breath hitched, because that handwriting, it was Luke's. his dead brother. He stormed back inside, shoving the letter toward Matilda. "Tell me what this means." She stared at the page for several seconds. Then something in her face cracked and tears began to fall. "He told me," when she whispered, "that the war took his brother, that he blamed someone, said someone made a decision that got Luke killed. I didn't know it was ... you." Colt stepped back like he'd been struck. "He told you about Luke." She nodded. "Said he watched a man stand still when he should have charged. Said that man went home and buried the truth." Colt's fists trembled. "I gave the order to hold. I was trying to save the rest of the squad." Luke disobeyed, ran ahead. Silence, then Matilda looked up. Royce wasn't just bitter. He believed Luke's death was murder. And he's not after revenge anymore. He's after your soul. Colt didn't believe in spirits, but he did believe in consequences. And somehow, somewhere, Royce had blurred the line between man and myth. Because the letter was real, and it had Luke's writing. And if Royce had Caleb, then maybe this wasn't about punishment anymore. Maybe it was about replacement. Colt walked to the back shed, the one he hadn't opened in years. Inside, under a tarp, was a lockbox. He opened it slowly, revealing worn maps, old letters, and a faded Union Army badge. "Then it's time I go find him," Colt said, voice low and steady. "And bring Caleb back." Matilda stood shakily. "I'm coming with you." Colt looked at her. They were no longer strangers. This was war now. A war against the past. Outside, the trail was quiet, but not empty. In the snow, fresh tracks led into the woods. Small feet. A child's. But beside them, nothing. No adult prints. Like Caleb had been walking alone. The footprints were small, too small for a man. They dipped into the snow like soft whispers. Weaving through the trees behind the cabin, silent, fragile, but deliberate. Colt marched ahead, rifle in hand. Every crunch beneath his boots was a countdown. Matilda followed close, Caleb's scarf wrapped around her neck like a lifeline. "No wind last night," Colt muttered. "These tracks are fresh, an hour old, maybe less." Matilda's breath caught. "Then he's nearby." Colt didn't answer, because deep inside, he felt it too. They were close, but not to Caleb. To something else, they crested a ridge. Just beyond the frozen creek, and there it was. An open patch of earth, a perfect rectangle in the snow. Dirt piled neatly beside it. A grave already dug, and beside it, a shovel. Clean, not rusted. Recently used. Matilda stopped cold. "Is it for him?" Colt scanned the area. No signs of movement. "No blood. No boy, maybe," he whispered. "Or maybe it's meant for one of us." He stepped toward the edge. Looked down, empty for now. Suddenly a rustle. From the tree line, Colt swung his rifle. Eyes sharp, a shadow moved just beyond the pines, slender, tall, watching and then gone. Like wind, Matilda knelt beside the grave, trembling. Why here? Why this exact spot? Colt stared at the soil. "I know this place." Matilda looked up. "How?" Colt pointed to a crooked birch tree nearby. "We camped here once, my brother's unit, before the last ambush." Luke sat under. "That tree, the night before he died?" Matilda's voice broke. "Then this isn't a grave." Colt's eyes darkened. "It's a message." On the edge of the pit, something glinted. Colt leaned down and picked it up. A small, rusted dog tag. Not his, not Luke's. "Roy's single," quotes behind them. A voice echoed through the trees, soft, familiar. "Matilda, ... It was a whisper. And it wasn't coming from ahead. It was coming from behind. Back, toward the cabin. Matilda turned, face pale. That was Caleb's voice. Colt's knuckles turned white around the rifle. No child speaks like that. They ran, back down the hill, through the trees, breath steaming like smoke. The cabin came into view, door swinging, fire, out. Empty. On the table, another letter. In the same elegant script, blood remembers. Bones return. And now, it's your turn. Colt stared at it, then at Matilda. They weren't just being hunted, they were being summoned. The wind moaned low through the broken cabin door. Matilda stepped in first, her boots leaving watery trails on the floorboards as melting snow dripped from her coat. Her eyes darted to the hearth. The fire was still glowing, freshly stirred. Yet, no one was there. No Caleb, no Royce, only warmth. And silence. Colt entered behind her, gun up, breath steady. He scanned every corner. If the fire's warm, someone was here. Minutes ago, Matilda whispered. But who lights a fire? Just leaves? Colt moved to the table. The second letter still lay there. But now it was another, smaller, torn. Scribbled in crayon, he picked it up slowly. "Mama, I'm okay," he said, not to cry. "He says he knew Daddy from before I was born." Matilda's hand flew to her mouth. "That's Caleb's writing." She took the page, fingers shaking, eyes wide. He thinks Royce is someone else." Colt's voice dropped. Royce made him believe that. Matilda turned to Colt. "What does he mean, Daddy, from before I was born?" Colt was silent, because he understood what she hadn't admitted. "Matilda," he said carefully, "Caleb's real father, did you ever tell him who he was?" Her face froze. Then slowly her shoulders dropped. "I told everyone he died in the mines, but that was a lie." Colt waited. Matilda looked at the fire. His real father was a soldier, a wounded man who passed through my town during the war. He stayed 2 nights. He never gave his real name. Colt stepped forward. "You think it was Royce?" "I don't know." Her voice broke. "I prayed it wasn't." A creak upstairs. Both their heads snapped up. Matilda grabbed the fire poker. Colt raised his rifle. "Stay behind me," he said. Each step on the stair moaned like old bones. At the top, nothing, just the small loft where Caleb had slept. And on the bed, his coat laid out, carefully like a shrine. Underneath it, something bulged beneath the blanket. Colt yanked it back, a wooden box. Inside, folded papers, letters, old, yellowed, stamped with the Union seal, and on top a photograph. 2 men in uniform smiling. Royce and Luke. Colt stared at it like it might bite him. Matilda whispered. They were friends. Colt nodded slowly. "Not friends," he said. "Brothers in arms, maybe even more." He read the letter on top. "To Luke's next of kin, I held him as he bled. I swore I'd tell his story, swore I'd make it right." Colt's voice cracked. Royce wasn't just after vengeance. Turned to Matilda, eyes wide. He was trying to raise Luke's son, but before they could process it, knock at the front door. Not loud, just patient. Matilda froze. Colt whispered, "Don't move." They stepped slowly down the stairs. The fire flickered low. Outside the frosted window, a shadow waited. Not moving, not speaking. Just there, waiting. The knock came again. Soft, measured. Colt raised his rifle, eyes locked on the door. "If it's him, we end this." Matilda Hart, hammering, shook her head. "Not with a gun." The door creaked open before either of them moved, and there he stood. Royce, but he didn't look like the monster they feared. No blood, no rage, just a man, worn, hollow. Snow clung to his coat, his eyes, not cold, just tired. He stepped inside slowly, glancing at the fire, then at Matilda, then at Colt. "I'm not here to take the boy," he said softly. "I'm here to take the truth." No one spoke, until Matilda finally whispered, "What truth?" Royce stepped forward and laid something on the table. Journaled, tattered, edges burned, the name carved faintly on the leather. "Luke Carson, my brother," Colt said, barely breathing. Royce nodded. "He died because of me. I gave the order. I left him when I shouldn't have." He looked at Colt. "I didn't know he had a son." Then at Matilda. "Not until I saw him." The same eyes. Matilda whispered, "Why not tell us?" Royce smiled faintly. "Men like me aren't trusted. And I didn't come to take, I came to give." Pushed the journal toward her. "Luke wrote about you. about that winter. He said you were the first warmth he'd known in months. Matilda's breath caught. He never forgot you. Ah. She opened the book slowly. Inside, sketches of her. Of Dry Creek. Of a baby. Her baby. Her fingers trembled. I didn't know he loved me. Royce's voice cracked. He did, till the end. Caleb stepped from the back room then, silently, still like a ghost. Royce knelt down, eye to eye. You look just like him, he said, voice raw. Then he handed Caleb a small box inside, a metal, faded ribbon, and a bullet. Royce said, the one he never fired. Said he'd save it for the day he had a reason to live. Caleb looked up. Was I that reason? Royce blinked hard. Still are. The snow outside fell quietly now. No howling, no shadows. Just peace. Royce turned to Colt. I buried what was left of Luke. Thought maybe it would end the ghosts. Colt nodded slowly. Sometimes ghosts don't want revenge. They want rest. Royce stepped outside. Matilda followed. Where will you go? He smiled at her, truly smiled for the first time. I've followed death long enough. Time I follow the living. And with that, he disappeared into the snow, not as a villain, but as a man who finally found forgiveness. Back inside, Matilda held the journal to her chest. Colt stood by the fire, watching Caleb turn the metal in his hands. Maybe now, Colt whispered, he can have a future. Matilda looked at him, so can we. And that, dear viewer, was the story of a woman no one wanted, a child no one understood, and a gunslinger who came not to take but to return what was lost. If this tale touched your heart, help us keep telling stories like this. Like this video, comment what part moved you most, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional Western journeys from Luminous Tales.